Hey guys, so we're going to do something a little bit different today in that a year ago we did a 20 things you didn't know about Scotty. Well, today we're going to flip the camera around. It's going to be 20 things you didn't know about Kian as he services his girlfriend's very filthy FG XR6. Man, this is disgusting. But anyway, all right, I'm going to go grab the camera. I'm going to put Kian in front and yeah, you're going to learn some stuff.
All right, enough intro talk. We're just going to get stuck into this thing. I'm going to change the oil on it and Scotty will just throw questions at me. Yes, it's my girlfriend's car, but I've been daily driving it a lot, mainly because I'm sick of putting kilometres on my VZ SSU. Prices of them is going up. I don't want to put pointless highway Ks on it. This thing's got 300,000 Ks on the clock. It's filthy, but underneath, it's actually really good. Makes for a great daily driver. So my plan now is to change the oil and keep it alive for as long as I can. So we'll jack her up first. First step, jack up your car.
How do we spell your name?
All right, so I've been alive for 24 years.
Well, that was the first question.
Yes. So there you go, that's my age. And the whole time I've been alive, my name has been a bugbear of my existence. So thanks to my parents for that. As you can see, I'm not, pearl white like lots of people in this country. But yet I have 3 Irish names, and that seems to confuse a lot of people. So my first name is Kian, not Kian, not Kian. And it's just spelled K-I-A-N. The way I say it to people is think of Ian, but with a K at the front. You're King Ian. Think of it that way, all right? I mean, I don't get too worked up about it. It is what it is. People get upset. They go, how can they not know what your name is? And I just go. It's to the point where if I go somewhere and, you have to give a name for a food, coffee, whatever, I just order food under James.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Castlemaine, not Castlemaine, going back to pronunciations.
Hey, I'm triggered by that. I'm from New South Wales, where it's Newcastle, and...
Well, a friend of mine keeps trying to tell me it's Newcastle, but he's never been or lived there, so I don't know why he does that to me. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a name. So the pronunciation is how you choose to pronounce it, and there are some unique individuals in Castlemaine who drive around with stickers on their cars that say there's no R in Castlemaine. So I grew up in Castlemaine. If you don't know where that is, it's in central Victoria. Yes, it's the same place the Castlemaine Rod Shop is from. We've got quite a good relationship with those guys. I lived there for at least 20 years, I'd say. And I only recently moved to Bendigo, which is just up the road, also in central Victoria.
So does that answer the next question of where you went to school?
Yes. So like I said, this is an interesting one actually. It'd be interesting to see if anybody knows what I'm on about here. So I went to all my schooling in Castlemaine except for university, which we'll talk about later. And the school I went to was a STEINER school. Now top points to you if you know what that is.
I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, what's the best way to describe it? Alternative education. It's
You're a fucking hippie.
Yeah. It's a, you would never know I went to a STEINER school with the way I act and the way I am in day-to-day life. But it's, yeah, alternative education. So I went from there from kindergarten to year 8. If you're not familiar with the Victorian education system, most primary schools will go from kindergarten or year 1 to year 6. And then secondary schools from year 7 to 12. And then by that time you're usually 18, you go off into the world. But I did year 7 to 8 there, and then I moved on to like a STEINER stream at the local public school, because Castlemaine's quite a small country town. There's not a lot there. There's 2 supermarkets, but they're both IGAs, no Maccas or anything like that. 2 sets of traffic lights in the whole town. So, it's a small place, so there isn't a whole lot of schools. I couldn't be bothered going up the road to Bendigo to school, so I just went to the secondary school, did a STEINER stream there, and then did straight up VCE in the public school system. And despite what people may say about the public school system, I would say the Castlemaine Secondary College is actually an all right place to go to school, so. Oh, and that's not a 14 mil.
Damn it. What was your first job?
Okay, so my first proper job was cleaning at a butcher after school in Castlemaine. A friend of mine didn't want to do it anymore. I know people may turn up their noses at it, but really cleaning up at a butcher is not as gruesome and derelict as you may think it is. But that was my job. I kept that right up until I think I got it when I was 17, because I used that money to buy my first car, depending on how you clarify your first car. We'll talk about that later. And I had that right up until I left to go to uni in Melbourne, because I did VCE, finished year 12, and then I did a gap year, but rather than travel, I worked to save money mainly for cars. But yeah, I worked as a cleaner at a butcher. It was actually a lot of fun. Met some mates there that I'm still friends with to this day, even though none of us work at that butcher anymore. They were butchers, I was just a cleaner. And yeah, it was great. 10 hours a week. Basically just spent a lot of time cleaning up chopping boards and knives and mincers, stuff that's not really as gruesome as you would think it is. It's not an abattoir. And yeah, that was it. Then went on to do building labouring and things during days off while I was at university to get me by and pay rego bills, and then after I finished uni I jumped into this job.
So, are you a qualified mechanic?
Absolutely not. When I did VCE at school, I did it at the secondary school I went to do that was actually an old trade school, and because of that they still had all the facilities to do trade stuff. So you could do building, you could do engineering, which is like welding and stuff. And there was also a TAFE course for automotive. So I did a Cert 2 in automotive technology, I think is what it's called, which was basically just, this is how you change a tyre, this is how you change oil. They did teach you things like how to pull apart and put together an engine. So it wasn't just purely basic stuff, but it was basically the TAFE course you would do before you became an apprentice mechanic, if you wanted to do that before you just jumped straight into an apprenticeship. And because it was at my school, I was into cars. It fit the bill, it fit my timetable. So even though I had no intentions of ever becoming a mechanic, I did a Cert 2 in auto tech or whatever you call it, but that's as far as my automotive qualifications go. I did the coursework so fast that I was daily driving my R31 Skyline at the time to school and back, which is only a 5-minute drive, but it still managed to break itself every third day. So I'd go into this class, do the textbook work and the practical 15 minutes, then for the other hour of the class I'd have my car up on the hoist trying to figure out why the rear brakes were sticking or why it was taking 10 minutes to start. So while that oil's draining out, I may as well just pull the airbox lid off and check the filter just for the sake of it while we're here. And of course, being a Ford, it uses torque bits for everything.
Alright, so what is your favourite car?
This is not an easy question to answer. I have dream cars, I guess, but if you think about it, the world of cars is so diverse. To pick out one is just ridiculous. I have cars that I love. I love Nissan GTRs. To me, a car that's actually a favourite of mine is a car I would personally own or have experience with. I don't have the right size torque bits, so I'm going to stop doing that and I'll go get it in a minute. My favourite car at the moment out of mine is actually my Nissan Patrol I bought, because it's a car that cost me not a lot of money. It hasn't really broken down and it takes me wherever I want to go. So that to me right now is my favourite car, because it's mine. I can get in it, I can take it somewhere, I can do whatever I want with it. I just wash it with a brush at the end of the day and it's done. I can't really choose a favourite car that's not mine personally, or out of cars I've experienced with, because there's just too many. I love R32 GTRs. I also love VF SS Commodores. Does that mean I have a favourite out of the two? No, because they're two completely different things. They're performance cars, but other than that, to choose one's hard. So I have favourite cars at different times, depending on what I'm doing with them, basically. I don't have one car where I go, I must have a Ferrari F40. If I don't have one by the time I'm dead, that's it. I think that's just a stupid, unattainable thing to think about. So I love cars. That's basically the short answer. I love cars, and I love whatever car suits what I'm doing at the time. That's my favourite car at that point in time, which I think is the right approach you have to have if you're a journalist. If you just focus on one thing, you just have tunnel vision, and then that's pointless. If you think Barras are the best engine in the world and a JZ's not good and an RB's not good and an LS is for people who do this, how far are you going to get? You need to go out there and explore things. That's why we have an L67 and a VN and a 1JZ and a Volvo brick. We could have just, turbocharged a whole bunch of XR6 Falcons gone, yes, it makes 1,000 horsepower, just like all the others out there. Or we could do something different and broaden your horizons. Just have a nice open approach to the world, particularly with cars. People argue too much. Just have a nice broad approach, accept other people's ideas, just have fun.
Having said that, you own 3 Nissans?
I do. Like I said, I own a Patrol. It's a GQ Patrol, and if you're a GQ nerd, it's a TB42 Auto. Why is it a TB42 and not a TD42? So one's petrol, one's diesel. Easy, the TB42 cost me $4,500 with COVID tax. A TD42 that I would own, that car came with a roadworthy, bear in mind, so I just walked in with rego and it was done. TD42 wagon like what I bought, not $4,500, add $10,000 to that for a diesel. Why? Diesel fuel's actually more expensive usually. And And on top of that, I didn't buy it to tow, I bought it to go off-roading. So as far as I'm concerned, a 4.2 litre petrol versus a 4.2 litre diesel to go up a hill, does it really matter? It's going to overheat anyway. Like, why would I pay 15 grand to overheat when I can pay 4.5? Laugh. And on top of that, I can get another TB42 for 500 bucks. Not, I think a short block TD42 you'd want is $7,000 to $8,000
Wow.
for a kettle. And I also have, I've had an affair with R31 Skylines for a long time. I currently have 1.5. I say half because I co-own a race car with a friend of mine. I also have an R31 Silhouette Series 3, red over silver, if you're into that. And the bugbear of my automotive existence for the last year, I've owned it for just over a year, is an S13 Silvia. If you're an S13 Silvia node, it's a K's, it's been manual swapped, and it's a CA18 turbo. Why is it CA18 turbo still not SR20? Same thing, tax. It's a factory CA18 turbo for starters, so it's simpler to keep it that way. And on top of that, how much is an SR20 turbo these days for any SR20 turbo that you would use? Yeah. Go on a marketplace or Gumtree, eBay, whatever. Have a look at the prices and you'll understand why it's still a CA18. It's a pile of junk and it doesn't work. And if they weren't worth what they were, it already would have been sent to scrap and parted out. But eventually I'll fix it. I'm just sick of dumping money into it. I'll give you an example. That car, a set of 4 plugs, it's only a 4-cylinder, the CA18, same as a SR20. To get the proper like iridium plugs, about 120 to 130 bucks a set, and it fouls them in about 5 minutes. So you might go, oh, we'll just stop it fouling, but you need to put the plugs in and then run the car and fiddle around with things to stop it fouling. But at that point, it's fouled them. And you can clean them up, but there's only so far you can keep doing that. And when you've spent as much money as I have on it, and the amount of time, and particularly the amount of punching walls trying to get it to work, you just get sick of it, and I just parked it. There's a whole workshop here of cars that aren't mine that we're busy covering week to week. Sometimes you just want to go home and not think about cars, not spend till 2 a.m. working on a Silvia that doesn't run. So yeah, 3 Nissans. Like I said at the start, I've got an SS Ute as well, a VZ. That is my daily driver, but I got sick of dailying it up and down the freeway and putting Ks on it for no reasons, and this was available. So my missus has been driving my R31 because she drives 10 minutes to work, not 2.5 hours. And I've been using this instead rather than having it sit there. So
let's switch track. What's your favourite drink?
I'd say as a general rule, my favourite soft drink would be Mountain Dew. It doesn't mean I go out and buy it all the time.
Yeah, brother.
Yes, nothing to do with that lanky prick. No, I'm joking, you can't say that. He's actually quite nice. When he came to the last Summer Nats before that was all canned because of worldwide events, I actually sat down with him for 20 minutes and interviewed him. And despite how busy he was at Summer Nats, he was actually quite nice. And if you go back now and watch that video, it's quite funny because I asked him, is there anything big in the pipeline for Cletus and his crew? And that was before the Freedom Factory was announced, but only about 2 weeks. And he just said, yeah, we've been working on something really big for a long time and you'll see that come to light soon. So we, in a way, but didn't really have the inside scoop on the Freedom Factory before anybody else, at least in Australia, probably knew about it. I didn't push him too hard to get the answer out of him, but yeah, 2 weeks later he announced that he'd bought a childhood dream. So he's a nice dude.
Favourite food?
That's too hard to answer. It'd be easier to list the food I don't like than the food I do.
Okay.
So yeah, depends on my mood.
What YouTube channels do you watch?
Well, we just mentioned Cletus. I don't watch every single one of his videos, but I do watch them. In terms of channels I watch pretty much every episode of, Mighty Car Mods still to this day, watch a lot of their stuff. Juicebox, those Irish nutters, I watch them, they're hilarious, partly because I have a thing for Japanese cars. Watch a Skid Factory every now and then. We have a good relationship with Alan Woody, but sometimes you just don't have time to sit down and watch a half-hour episode. Doesn't mean their episodes are bad, it's just weird. You'd be surprised how many YouTubers don't sit down and watch hours and hours of YouTube because they're busy making YouTube. So I'd be the same, I'm sure, if you talk to somebody who worked on television. Do they sit there and watch 6 hours of television every night? No, because they've spent all day doing it. They don't want to go home and watch it. A couple of others. Adam LZ, again, I come and go from him depending on what he's doing. His new compound's cool. But I more tend to gravitate to cars he's building. So his Barra Swap Mustang, his R32 4-door, his S13, all these cool cars he's built. If he's doing a series on that, his GDR as well, I'll watch that. There are quite a few others that I'm sure I would name if I sat here and thought about it for ages, but those are sort of the main ones. Noriaro too, Alexi in Japan. His stuff is killer. He's somebody where if his video comes out, I will sit down and watch it because his content is just so unique. Seeing an Australian in Japan giving you an insight that's not just a tourist that's there for 2 weeks at Ibisu throwing cars around, you know, North Course is quite cool.
Assuming you do like your job, what's your favourite part of your job?
Well, yes, I do love my job. I mean, we'll talk about the job as in the broader Street Machine job role as a whole, not just Carnage. And if that was to be the case, I'd say things like behind the scenes access we get. And that can be anything from, yes, we get into events for free if we're working at them, but just things like we can walk into Max Performance or MPW and go and talk to Zane or Adam, and they'll just give us a tour of the workshop and go, this is all the projects we're working on. Now, they might do that with a customer as well, but I think just that's really cool. Another thing I really love is making people's day with things like if you call somebody up to say, oh, we want to put your car in the magazine or your story will be in this issue of Street Machine. You know, for a lot of people, that's a huge deal, and to hear their excitement is awesome. Drag Challenge is a massive thing. To be part of that event and help run it, yes, it's a long, long week and there's a lot involved, but for the most part, everybody who's part of that circus is amazing, and to just be involved with it at all, but particularly at the level we are, running the thing, is awesome. So, and then just other things like getting to go to Summonats and racing a car, and if I blow a rod out the side, it's not my car. It's always fun. So no, I'm not going to replace this because I didn't get a replacement for it, but I'll just give it a quick blowout. Don't scratch the bumper that's faded and covered in bugs and has a big scrape mark down here. Don't scratch it, the comments will get mad. I might grab and do one of these soon. But 300,000 Ks is probably due for a major service, but for the sake of this video, we'll just change the oil, get the bugs out of the filter, and that's all good. But yeah, the job's killer. The stuff we get to do is awesome, and it's hard to just put it down to one thing you love because there's so many aspects of it. And that's the beauty of a job like this. It isn't just go into an office and put numbers in a computer for 8 hours. There's so many aspects to it and so many ticking things that all goes to be part of it. And that's the beauty of it. You can walk into work one day and do one thing and walk in another day and do something completely different. So it's awesome. You know, other perks too. Sometimes we get some cool cars to drive around in. I mean, I got to drive an R-Spec Mustang not long ago. We had a Z01 Camaro on Drag Challenge in 2019. Cool stuff like that. So, you know, there's lots of perks, but none of those stack up against a 1JZ Volvo, let's be honest.
So how did you get your job?
Dumb luck is the short answer. So I did mention before I went to university, I went to La Trobe in Melbourne, because there's a few campuses around Australia, and studied sports journalism, because I figured a normal journalism degree wouldn't be stimulating enough for me, and they are very similar, just the sport journalism has sports part woven into the curriculum. And as part of that degree, you had to do 120 hours of actual real-world placement, and that's journalism is a field where, unlike being, say, a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer, you don't have to have a qualification to do it. So if you go for a job in journalism, all people will care about is your real-world experience. So they go, I think the curriculum's now changed, you don't have to do the placement, but they go, if you don't do placement, you won't get a job for a long time. You have to go out there and do real-world things to prove you actually have the ability to cover a story, find a story. So they go, do 120 hours of placement, usually unpaid. And I was kind of scratching my head. I was like, I might just go to a local newspaper. Because, you know, you might go, I'll just go work for The Age. You know how many journalism students want to do an internship with The Age or the Herald Sun or whoever, the equivalent newspapers? Yeah. So I thought I'll contact a few local newspapers. And then I noticed that Street Machine in particular, because Street Machine is part of a much bigger company that encompasses, you know, Wheels, Motor, 4x4 Australia, Unique Cars. There's other titles too, but those are the motoring titles. And I noticed that out of all of those, Street Machine had the most amount of young employees, if that makes sense. Aiden was still on the books at the time. He was doing Project VL, and I thought, if I've got Aiden on, maybe I can get some time doing intern work with him. I didn't know anybody at Street Machine, and I just sent Telfo an email. I found his work email, and I said, hey, look, I'm a university student in Melbourne. I've got to do 120 hours of unpaid work. Would you be interested? And to my surprise, 2 or 3 days later, he replied and said, you know what, come down to the office Wednesday, and we'll give you a trial. The first thing I ever did was, there's a section in the magazine called Fanging Flick, and we review a car-related movie every month. And he asked me to write one on the Fast and the Furious. And it took me all day to do it because I was so petrified about writing one wrong word. But he, in true Telfo fashion, he was completely sympathetic. He goes, yeah, it's cool, no worries. So everything I wrote for Street Machine was published. It was about, one of the most famous car movies of all time. And it just went from there. I did 1 day a week to 2 days a week to becoming a casual to then being put on full time 6 months after I started interning. And that was quite cool because one thing we were told at university is getting a job in journalism may take you a long time because it's such a small field. And in my head, I wasn't expecting to get into automotive journalism for years. I thought I'd have to slog it out at a local newspaper, build up your skills base as a general journalist, and then go, I actually have an interest in cars. Can I come across and do car stuff? But Tolfo, in his good heart, gave me a chance, and here I am, basically.
Repeat what you did.
I just dropped. The sump plug was sitting up here. This particular drain pan doesn't really have anywhere to put a sump plug or a filter. And I just had it sitting on the edge. And sure enough, as soon as I put my arm underneath to grab it, I knocked it into the drain pan. Because I'm about to pull the filter off, so I'm going to have to move it, the drain pan, to catch that.
All right, so moving on with the questions. Do you have any kids?
I do now. For a long time, I was just a single Pringle doing my own thing, and then about 8 months ago, I started dating a girl I've known for a very long time, and she has a 9-year-old son, so I have a 9-year-old stepson, little Kobe. He's a great little kid, currently on school holidays, living his best life. So he watches a lot of YouTube, but he does not watch this kind of stuff. He's more interested in how to get the latest Fortnite skin. So if he does watch this, hi Kobe, I highly doubt it. But yeah, I got him, and then not that it really counts, but we got ourselves a puppy this weekend gone too, so.
What sort of puppy?
A Jack Russell Cross Western Highland Terrier. So I think he basically just looks like a Jack Russell. He's only 8 weeks old, well, nearly 9 now. And people may go, oh, you know, little yappity dog, blah, 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 blah. But my first dog is still with my parents. He's staying there because he's 14 years old, and I can't take him away from my mum, despite what she says, because she'll crack it if I did. And he's a fox terrier, and he is a great dog. Yeah, he can misbehave, but like, they're still great dogs if you know how to handle them for the most part. This filter's not going to be fun. So yeah, that's going to be somebody we can raise together for the next 14, 15 years, hopefully at least.
All right, do you have what's your greatest achievement?
2, I'm going to say. One would be getting this job, just because, like I mentioned before, I was led to believe that getting a job in journalism would be incredibly difficult. I was expecting to be unemployed from a journalism point of view for like 12 months after I graduated. And I was employed for Street Machine for 12 months before I graduated, funnily enough, because it took me a while to graduate for a couple of reasons. Nothing sus, I didn't fail anything. I just got preoccupied with this job and didn't fully finish my degree for 6 months longer than it should have taken.
Any jealousy amongst your classmates?
Well, I don't want to sound blunt, but I didn't have a problem with them, but I didn't really socialise with many of my classmates outside of group assignments. They were all interested in going and seeing the latest indie band at the pub and spending, you know, going to music festivals. I spent all my weekends working on cars with mates. That'd be one big achievement. The second one, and it's going to sound a bit funny to some people, but it'd be buying my VZSS Ute. And it's not because it's a VZSS Ute necessarily, it's because the whole time I was going through uni, I was earning $200 a week at best, trying to keep, because I had a VS Ute at the time, not a VZ, because I didn't want to deal with alloy tech life. So I had a VS, and I would sit there in university classes I was bored in on car sales looking at these $15,000 SS Utes, and that might not sound like much to some people, but when you're earning $200 a week, trying to basically just saving to pay rego bills, the idea of owning a $14,000 V8 big thirsty Ute is pretty far-fetched. And I sort of said to myself, you know what, when I can buy one of those of my own accord with my own money, that's to me will kind of be when I've made it, basically, financially. And, you know, I'm in a place in my life where I can go, yes, I just bought myself one of my attainable dream cars, I guess you could call it. And not long after I finished university, I saved my money away hard from this job and went out and bought myself a VZSS Ute with $14,000 of my own cash. No bank loans or anything. That might not sound like much to people, like I said, but to me, barely being able to afford to put fuel in a VS and struggling to pay rego bills, to go from that to being able to go, here's 14 grand, I'm buying a Ute I've wanted for 3-4 years, was very cool. And that to me was my symbol that at that point in my life, I'd made it and done something that I really wanted to achieve. So
Yeah, cool.
That was a big achievement of mine.
What's your favourite Carnage car?
Oh, Mel's XR6. No. Right now, I'm trying to think of cars I've had more of a relationship with, because a lot of these cars, I mean, I've never driven the MX-5. I've driven the Volvo, but that was with its old setup. The VN's quite cool. Yes, it's in bits right now, but I think what I like about it is the fact it's a registered car. It's clean, it's nice. It's not stupidly expensive. Pretty much anybody could build it on a pretty tight budget. Getting the VN itself might be a bit expensive now, but everything else isn't too bad. That's quite cool. The Trovo is cool just because it's something different. The Breen is a fun little nugget. I haven't driven it in anger yet, but I have moved it around. My favourite car for a while was the AU, which we actually said goodbye to this week officially. It's now properly gone to its new home. That was cool just because it was literally thrown together on a budget, and it worked really well, and it was a lot of fun. But out of the cars we have now, I'd say my favourite car is probably the VN. Partly because, yeah, I think it's a cool little car, like I said, but more importantly than that, as much as I'm an impartial journalist, deep down I am still a Holden man. And as we sit here right now, if you don't count the Barina, which, you know, depending on definitions you might not, it's the only Holden we have. So it's quite cool. So that would be my favourite car right now. But in saying that, we're about to announce a new project, or it may have been announced by the time this video's out, I'm not sure, and that will probably turn out to be my favourite project. So the actual answer to that question is my favourite project is one you don't know about yet. So that's going to be awesome. So obviously, Valvoline oil filter. Not as hard to get as you may think it is. You might not be able to get it over the counter at a lot of parts shops, but funnily enough, if you go to Bunnings, any Bunnings, the selection of Valvoline stuff is off the chops, and that includes oil filters, and obviously this being a Z516 for a Falcon is pretty common. So no, this isn't just some hyper thing that we get because we're sponsored by Valvoline. You can just as easily get your own filters if you want, and we run them on all our cars, and we've never had a problem. And we have had some problems with some other filters in the past, who I won't mention. So these are a safe bet, just like the oil I'm about to pour in. Got some nice 1050 to go in this thing too. Obviously, like I said, it's at 299. It's pretty much at 300,000 Ks, so slightly thicker oil. But it's nice and quiet, this one, being a true Barra. Hopefully we get plenty more miles out of it.
Next question is there some advice that you would tell 20-year-old Kian? I know it's only 4 years ago for you, but...
A lot has changed in 4 years though. That was when I was still at university. Like I said just before, not making a whole lot of money, which is fair enough. That's just part and parcel of it. The thing I would say to him is just to not panic. I wasn't overly panicked about the job situation after uni, but it also wasn't a sure thing. Things with finances too, you know, just everything usually will work out. It's not like I own a house yet or anything, but I'm not like religious or anything, but I do have a view that things always work themselves out at the end of the day. And yeah, just to not worry, don't be stupid and waste money on things, which I never really did. But yeah, just don't panic. Life sorts itself out. You will end up getting that VZ ute. You will end up getting a girlfriend. It wasn't a big deal of mine at the time, but it did end up happening for me, which was cool. Because I never thought it really would anytime soon. I mean, have you seen me? Yeah, just relax.
Drop 200 grand in your lap today. What car would you build?
Man, you can't...
No, you can't say you buy a house.
No, you can't buy a house for $200,000 anyway.
That would be the sensible move.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Just because you can probably still get one for a reasonable price and then build on top of it, I'd probably be inclined to get an R32 GDR, and I wouldn't get 1,000 horsepower out of it. Probably get more like 500, because I have a big belief that a car needs to be usable more on the road than anywhere else, and I think 1,000 horsepower GDR isn't really something you can use a lot. You can't really buy an R34 for 200 grand, let alone modify it as well.
Really?
No, not. By the time you spend, depending on how good a one you want, I know all the ones that are publicised are these low kilometre NERs and V-Spec 2s and everything, but by the time you spend, let's say, over $100,000 on an R34, GDR parts are still not cheap, aftermarket ones. I'm just measuring oil because this has got to take around 7 litres. you won't be able to build much of a car. So you've got to hope the GTR you bought some really good nick, whereas an R32 is lighter. I have more of an affiliation with it because even though I'm young, I'm a big Mark Skate fan, and the GTR R32 was the one that, you know, destroyed Fords, Holdens, everything else in the touring car series. So I have a soft spot for the R32 anyway. It's lighter chassis. It's the most analog chassis too. One of the better looking ones. And you could still build and buy one pretty decently for $200,000. So that's probably what I would do, especially with values going up, you know. That would be my pick.
What's on your bucket list in terms of one thing that you've got to do before you die?
One thing I've always wanted to do, I did just mention Mark Scaife, and as a result of that, I'm a big supercars fan, as it's now called. One thing I would love to do, not need a supercar, because that's just ridiculous. I want to one day be able to take a car that's somewhat well sorted and do a lap flat out of Bathurst, at least one. I know you can go there and drive around it, I think it's down to 40 k's an hour now, you can't even do 60 in some spots when it's a public road, but I've been there a few times just as a spectator, and there's something about the place. I love drag racing and all that kind of stuff. I think it's incredibly cool what people build, but my roots is going fast around corners with grip. It's what I love doing the most, and Bathurst is just the pinnacle of that in Australia. So, you know, even if it was something like the equivalent of a Bathurst 6-hour car or something, you just hustle that around flat out for a lap or two. They don't run many track days up there because it's dangerous on a public road, but one day I would like to take some car there, whether it's my car, a really good production car, whatever it is, and just push my ability as far as I could at Bathurst in a safe way. That would be just something that's something I'll be very disappointed if I never get to do, ever. So that's on my list. Lots of other things, but that's one of the main things I've always thought. If I don't get to do that, my automotive palette of things I've done will always feel slightly empty. I don't have to enter a race there, but to go flat out in a car around that track, particularly over the top, yeah, it'd be scary, bloody scary. But that's all part of it. You know, you love being scared by a car. If you're not being scared by a car, you're doing it right. All right, so car's back level on the ground now. Check the oil. They take 6.8 litres, I put pretty much 7 in, and it might be hard for you to see on camera, but the oil itself stops about there, and the full mark is there. So it does have a slight weep on the front of the sump, so a tiny bit extra oil is not going to hurt it. But it runs clean for a 300,000k banger. Gets good fuel economy. I mean, I've been driving it to Bendigo and back every day this week, and it's 8 litres per 100 k's and 800 kilometres to a tank. Just standard FG XR6 non-turbo. Not on LPG, on petrol, on auto ZF6 speed, not the 5-speed or the 4-speed that's in the taxi, which is a taxi only thing. So yeah, it's getting great economy for an old bus. I mean, it's only a Series 1 FG, nothing special about it. So it's a shame we don't have these things anymore. I mean, your mum's iX35 might be able to fit a few more balls in the back of it, but I still think this is way cooler. But anyway, we're not going to get into that debate right now. Car's service, I'm going to call that done. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much. I will give it a clean once I stop running it on the highway every day. And yeah, we'll go hook into some other cars. I think the plan is to hook into the MX-5 and put something bigger on it, potentially. If not, Sora needs the engine pulled out. VN and Trolvo have pulled apart engines. There's heaps to do. So we're going to get stuck into that. And we'll see you all next time on Carnage. Oh, and Turbo Taxi is hiding next to the new project. So we can't show it to you right now. But yes, it's a running, driving, registered car, but it needs a little bit of magic to make it run that 10, which is in the works. So yeah, lots to do, too much to do. So we'll call this episode done for now. Thanks for watching. Like I said, I hope you didn't get too bored. And we'll catch you next time with Scotty on the camera on Carnage.